Welcome to THA Talks, for free thought and open minds. Hello, I'm Paul Obitelli and welcome to another edition of THA Talks, the alternative podcast show from the UK. Our talks include news, conspiracy, spirituality, the occult, science, history, art, philosophy, religion and much more. If you'd like to check out our full archive, just go to www.thatalks.com to listen to or to download all our free content. And if there's anyone who'd like to contact us and give us some feedback, or maybe you'd like to recommend a guest for the show, you can email us info@thatalks.com, or you can go to our website and contact us via the contact tab there. And don't forget, you can subscribe to the show via our RSS feed, and you can also find us on iTunes and Stitcher and many other podcast directories out there. Well, hello everyone, welcome back to THA Talks. It's good to be here, although I'll start by apologising ahead of the show if my voice sounds a little bit hoarse. I have got a bit of a horsey voice because I've got a bit of a chest throaty thing going on at the moment, so I thought I'd just put that out there first. Also, I'd like to say sorry for the long absence. I mean, you know, this happens and we're always back and that's all cool and stuff, but I do feel it's the courteous thing to do, say sorry for being so long in uploading a new show. David Parry's been very busy away as well. He's out of the country at the moment. Shana and Stephanie with Hijack Radio, they've had their hands full, and I've been tied up as well, and I am soon moving into that new room where the studio's going to be better and the show's going to be better. So we're getting there. And it's just been one of those things again. Although I will say, I think what's been happening in the UK over the last few weeks, we've had a really bad few weeks, I have to say, and it's kind of probably slowed things down a bit as well as it does. It kind of makes everything seem a little bit more heavy. And I'm going to kind of go into it now. Obviously, I haven't done a show while these things have gone on, so I'm going to sort of just touch on them now, because I feel I really should. I mean, we had the Manchester bombings at the pop concert where a lot of young girls were killed and people were killed. That was terrible. And then shortly after that, we had the London attack where people were run over and then attacked with knives. Horrific scenes. These people that, they know more about God than us, apparently. Yeah, right. But yeah, they got to work all right. And on top of that, the Grenfell Tower burnt down yesterday in North Kensington, London. A fire broke out in the lower flats, and before you know it, the whole block of flats within hours was engulfed in flames. They think that perhaps there was some maintenance issues or it wasn't looked after as it should. It's ongoing investigation, so we don't know yet, but it's been horrific. You're talking young children, babies, families. It's horrific. I mean, 20 people approximately dead already. It's probably going to climb a lot higher than that. In fact, I'm sure it's going to climb a lot higher than that. So that's another horrific thing that's just happened recently. So, I mean, I'm speaking on my own now, but I'm sure I speak on behalf of the whole THA Talks community. You know, we'd like to send all our warmest sympathies and our prayers are with all those that have passed away and moved on, their families that are suffering now, and all those that are now fighting for their lives. We're just sending you all our prayers, and that's all we can do, unfortunately. But yeah, as I said, it's kind of, I had to roll that all into one. So on top of all that, we've had a general election here in the UK, which is another militant thing, although a bit more self-inflicting than stuff I've brought up already. And it's a very draining thing. It ended up a hung parliament, which means it's still ongoing, and more politics. It's just a politics overload, and it's probably going to carry on into the year. And so yeah, we're really in the midst of it here in the UK, and it's kind of like ties into what guests I've got coming on now. We're going to be speaking with John White, and we're going to basically be discussing a lot of the stuff that I've just been talking about. John is going to come on the show a lot more, and he's also going to help host, which I've mentioned to you in the past. And we go back a long way over the internet in the conspiracy realm, in the research realm. And I've got a lot of time for John's views and his work. So without any further ado, let's crack on. Hello, John White. Welcome to the show, mate.
Good evening, Paul. How are you?
Yes, I'm very good. I'm a little bit bunged up at the time of the year. I think the change of seasons is having it on me. But so I apologise if I'm a little bit bunged up during the show. But
no worries.
Obviously, it's great to have you back on THA. And we're obviously going to be doing more work together on THA. And I mean, over the past few weeks, there's been so much going on. And I just thought it'd be a perfect time to bring you on the show.
Last 7 weeks, really, isn't it? The last 7 weeks. Since the election was called, we've been in a right whirlwind.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Well, since the last show, we had the Manchester Arena bombing. Then not long after that, we had the London attacks and London Bridge with the stabbings. And then, of course, we had a big general election that was surprisingly called by Theresa May from the Conservative Party. And then recently we've just had a horrific tower, block of flats, a tower in London that is just burnt down in the most horrific way with what's looking like it's going to be in the maybe even three figures, including children. So there's horrific stuff there. So, I mean, it's been one hell of a month and not a great month to say the least. Let's start off with, before we go into the terrorist attacks and obviously the recent event in London with the fire. Let's go on. Let's hit on the political spectrum. You know, we've got the Tories and Labour. What are your thoughts on what's been happening there recently?
Well, 7 weeks ago, I put out a video on my YouTube, which was me sort of looking at the political landscape at the time that Theresa May called the election. And I went with the evidence I had in front of me and generally predicted that the Tories would manage to increase their number of seats and that Labour didn't have much chance. So, you know, how absolutely wrong I was. And I'm the first to admit I didn't see what's going to be happening over the next 6 weeks. So I think we've all been caught a little bit on the hop and are adjusting to a new reality where right now, as of today, we don't have a government.
Right.
We've got the Conservative Party pretending to be in charge, which is not the same thing at all.
What do you think of the idea that...
The Queen's speech, I think, is currently scheduled for next Wednesday.
What do you think of the idea that possibly... I mean, I personally started to believe this during the election. Possibly the Tory party actually knew all along that maybe this happened through the election, deliberately throwing silly things out there, like talking about fox hunting and little things like this,
yes,
so that they'd lose seats, so it would give them an excuse to wriggle out of Brexit. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, I'm very well aware of people's suspicions, and I think I can't castigate anyone for being suspicious. When we put these things together, we lay them out side by side, and we look at, okay, was this some kind of Euro fudge? There's a few factors. There was a story that it was Jean-Claude Juncker who pushed May into actually holding the election, and that at several summit meetings, the EU had indicated it felt that May needed to pass this great reform bill to get all of the EU law onto the UK statute books as part of negotiating the exit. And I think that May was being, the story is, this was in the Daily Mail, that May was being pushed by Juncker into thinking that she couldn't be sure about securing that because of the potential of remaining rebels inside the Conservative Party. If that's true, and it was the head of the EU Commission who was responsible for pushing May into calling an election, and I mean that's an absolutely tragic set of circumstances. It doesn't necessarily mean May was in on it. She could just be very naive. But I think when we look at the stories we've now heard about how May has actually been running her cabinet, and she had these two gatekeeper attack dog press officers, and even the cabinet ministers couldn't get direct access to the prime minister. I think if you think about that, the opportunity for May to pull a fast one, it does increase. I mean, she's a Remainer, she's a Bilderberger. She's up to her neck in allowing UK jihadists to travel to and from the Middle East to fight for Bilderberger foreign policy goals, directly meaning that she has a responsibility to the fact that the Manchester boys were still resident in Manchester pretty much unopposed, and undoubtedly makes me feel that she's compromised by this, and that the UK jihadis have damaging information against the UK government, and that might be part of why they haven't been effectively tackled.
I'd say I've got a question on that point. I've got a question for you.
Out of these things at the moment, they go in so many ways. So I think it is possible, but we have to work on the assumption that it's not really whether these politicians are on the straight or not. It's whether we can get the collective grip of the people on the back of their necks and make them do what we want them to do. I think May, in that sense, is more vulnerable following this election, and that potentially is a good thing. But equally, I think that Corbyn is susceptible to pressure from people pushing now for a proper leave and an exit from the single market, customs union, jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. So, I mean, that's my general review of how I feel about the idea that there could have been some deliberate purpose behind this. But then when we look at that election campaign, Norman Tebbit was on LBC. And he was eviscerated, May, in that little discussion. But one point that he very clearly made is that you do not call a snap election when your manifesto is not ready. You get your manifesto to win the election. You make sure there are sweeties in the manifesto. I mean, Conservatives always used to be about bugging in tax breaks at election time. Do you remember that? And you get your manifesto ready, then you call the snap election. But as it happened, everybody was supposed to believe that all sides of the political debate were going from a cold start, because May thought, oh, what the hell, it's Tuesday, I'll call an election, or whatever day of the week it was, and suddenly we get this absolute mess of a result. Could it be that Theresa May simply felt that the strength of the polls and the Brexit argument was so strong that she would get the vote she wanted on that alone, and therefore she could sneak some dirties in? The fox hunting one, why? Everybody asks why. Is that because she owes somebody for getting the position last year?
Perhaps. I mean,
I don't know. The
thing that gets me is
a strange thing to offer. There must have been some ulterior motive.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing that gets me is that although there's like some people that are saying, oh, this is now blown Brexit out, which I do generally believe. I don't think we are going to get Brexit now, because I think I'm just too suspicious of it all now.
I'll be happy to argue that point in a moment.
Yeah, great. But the thing is it just seems like they're using this as, whereas, to be honest, if you did regard this recent election as, hello, can you hear me?
Oh, I lost you for a second.
Okay, right, I'm back. If you did regard this election as a rerun, like a second referendum, then in reality you could say that about 84% of people that voted for the Tories and Labour, who both in their manifesto had Brexit, leave the single market, a proper Brexit. So everyone that voted for Labour and everyone that voted for the Tories, particularly the Tories, which got most votes, were voting for Brexit. So if anything, it should be now even more solid that this is it. We want to go.
There is no valid argument for a soft Brexit. But let's talk about that. I mean, our fear is that we won't get a proper Brexit and we'll get a soft Brexit. We'll still be in the single market in some way. We'll still have free movement in some way. We'll still be under the European Court of Justice in some way. Because those are the three main pillars that distinguish what is and isn't Brexit.
Yeah.
Now, what I would say is, if we forget what's going on in the UK, we look at what's going on in Europe. The European Parliament has been through a big process while we've been busy looking at our navels, and they have come up with their Brexit timetable for the negotiations. And this has been agreed by all 27 other member states. Now, in this timetable, the bits that we want are right at the end, which doesn't make any surprise, does it? So they want us to come to the table and then talk through all of their Eurobladder before we even get anywhere near, and also set up a bill, before we get anywhere near do you know what? You can or cannot have access to the single market in this particular way. Before we get near, you can make your own trade deals now, or we'll make a trade deal with you. That's right at the end. They don't want that until they've got everything else that they want. Now, that is a huge problem straight away because they aren't going to be able to alter that. They can't just have their negotiating team just do something else because that's what the European Union has agreed it's going to do. And every day, but from their point of view, we are squandering, is actually making achieving that timetable harder and harder and harder. And really, it's already gone into the practically impossible. And then when we actually get to, let's say we get to the end of that process, there's then a deal. That deal then has to get through the European Parliament, with every single member state having veto. Now, considering the competing interests of the different member states, and where they see their advantages and disadvantages, there is no way that's going to happen. Because, for example, if Germany and France say, fine, UK, you can have a concession on free movement, the Eastern European states, especially Poland, etc., they're not going to like that. So the chances that they can get through the EU Parliament, and then it comes to our Parliament, and then our MPs have this lovely vote on it. They either accept it or they don't. If they don't accept it, we just hard Brexit, because on the 31st of March 2019, we reached the end of the 2-year timetable for Article 50, and there is there's no basis for us being a part of anything else after that. The Article 50 process says that's it, you're out, you're gone. And although there are those who argue it can be different than that, in fact, it really can't. And then if we look at, say, what's happening inside the Labour Party, Corbyn and McDonnell, I think, really represent the leadership of the party right now. And as long as Corbyn is the leader, I think that is continued to be the case. And that means that the manifesto Labour just went to the country with, which stated it would look to negotiate access to the single market, but not be in the single market. That is Labour Party policy. Now, you've got someone like Keir Starmer, who's now a Brexit negotiator. He's talking absolute dribble 2 days ago because he was saying, well, perhaps there's some way that we can stay in the single market and negotiate not having free movement. I mean, it's a good talking point.
It's not going to happen.
Maybe it gives Labour Remainers a little bit of hope to cling on to.
I don't know.
The reality is, sorry, Paul.
I was just saying, I don't know if it would be possible if they can kind of work trade deals out through industries. So for example, they can say, listen, this industry and that industry are suiting the EU and the UK. So how's about we do a tariff reduction on the cars that we buy from Germany? If, on the other hand, we can do this and that, maybe they can do that. A few sort of just bargains.
I actually think we might see private arrangements between different companies and suppliers. I think the market will come in, step in, and sort out the bullshit because they know the politicians can't handle it. It's too complex for them.
Yeah.
But back to what I'm just making that point about Keir Starmer. He's saying we can stay in the single market and renegotiate free movement. But it's absolutely impossible because it's a fundamental 4-pillar principle. And the EU cannot compromise on any of the 4 pillars or the EU falls over. So, this is just the same tired old media talking points from Labour Remainers that we've heard before. There's no real substance to it.
Yeah.
And the party that went all out for capturing that stonking Remain majority, which was supposed to be out there, the Liberal Democrats, they increased their seats slightly, but they got their arse kicked generally all over the place. Their leader has gone. And the MP they elected as a beacon of Remain resistance to Brexit, just by a squeak, Zach Goldsmith took his seat back. So the whole mood of the country is about, if a unifying mood of the country is recognise you can't go back, got to go forward. We all voted leave. It's a bloody mockery to think we're going to stay. We're going to be out. So despite how it looks, and despite what compromises might be trying to get settled at the heart of the British establishment and state, in terms of the European picture, the fundamental process is just unstoppable. We've voted to leave. We're going out. And I do believe that to be the case.
Okay.
On this timetable business alone, Paul, because if the EU cannot complete its timetable, then that equally is voided at the end of the Article 52
right,
years. So there's a crisis coming, that's for sure.
Okay, so with regards to the Tories, we've got the Tories are now speaking with the DUP, which for those who may not know in a different country, the DUP are the Democratic Unionist Party, which is the most popular party in Northern Ireland at the moment, which are pro-unionist, pro-British. So obviously there's a lot of controversy in Northern Ireland because you have the Sinn Féin and the DUP, very competitive. And it's looking like the Tories are going to take the DUP 10 seats, bring them to the Tories, or work in some way with the Tories to continue the government. They're pro-Brexit. Very, very traditional Christian, very old-fashioned Christian views, which get criticised a lot by the liberal media. Some of them, I think, I think you've got to respect all religions. You respect their point of view. If you don't have to agree with them, but it's you respect them for what they are. But that's my opinion. What is it? What's your views on that and how that's going to pan out?
Well, firstly, with the DUP itself, I think we should talk plainly about it. It is what it is. It's a fundamentalist Christian party, anti-abortion, anti-gay, pro-death penalty, and generally, spare the rod and spoil the child. That's the kind of party that it is. Yeah. There are a couple of little silver linings in this potential deal, in that the DUP are pushing the Tories towards hard Brexit. B, the DUP are pushing the Tories to do something to modify austerity. But nevertheless, taking the deal on its merits is still going to leave, say it goes ahead and the DUP supply this confidence to supply votes to keep the government in power and make sure they can pass a budget, which is what they're talking about, not a proper coalition. But obviously there would be some kickbacks for DUP for that. But even if that managed to get started and get rolling as a government, it's going to be so pathetically anemic and so vulnerable to any forms of protests and strikes and disruptions that, this is 1974. This is February 1974, when we last had an election that returned a result where no one could form a majority government. And that government, in a society a lot less pressured than the one we have today, lasted 9 months before there was a second election, which when the 70s rolled on. So I think that the momentum of travel is with Labour because they have activated and energised the youth vote, the women vote, and shown that voting can matter. So they're also getting some of the apathetic people to come and vote. The last election we've just had was a very good turnout, getting back towards historic highs for a general election, almost 70% turnout. And the problem the Tories have, really, is that was a record result for them. That was a really good high Tory vote in terms of number of votes, but it's not translating anymore into number of seats. So I think outside of this DUP situation, I think that first past the post itself is starting to break down in a multi-party environment. But let's come back to Ireland. And I wouldn't pretend in any sense to be an expert on Irish politics. So my knowledge is pretty basic. So for a start, I don't want to make any pronouncements about the peace process and who was right and who was wrong and who's the better party and who's been more honourable. I'm not in a position to comment about that. But in terms of a general picture, we have a situation where we had a very troubled history. We had a peace process in the 1990s that resulted in the Good Friday Agreement. And since then, the factions in Northern Ireland politics have had their own parliament at Stormont, and they've been meeting and they've been engaging in politics and not terrorism. And so things have got better. But I'm not saying that things are completely better in Northern Ireland, but they are better than they were 20 years ago. Into that, we suddenly get this election result where suddenly Theresa May only has one option if she's going to be able to form a minority government, and that is to bring the DUP on board. So despite the fact that the Good Friday Agreement stipulates that the British government must remain neutral between all parties in Northern Ireland politics. The Tories want to bring the DUP in, gain the power of the DUP votes, and give the DUP concessions for doing so. Now, this has understandably set off Sinn Féin. And they flew into London 2 days ago now, I believe it was. And there is a reason for a question mark over whether Sinn Féin might and take up their seats.
Could I ask you to repeat that? You cut off a little bit then, just when you said the word Sinn Féin.
There is a valid reason to think that Sinn Féin might come to Parliament and take up their seats, which they've never done. And they have 7 seats. And if they take them up, it does shift the balance of power so that Theresa May will then be very weak indeed. Now, that's not saying that's going to happen, but there are reasons to think that it might. One of them is the DUP saying to Sinn Féin, choose Stormont or Westminster. Because the Parliament at Stormont broke down at the beginning of the year and it hasn't restarted. So the DUP are kind of saying, well, we're going to come over and sit with the Conservatives. So, maybe you should sit at Westminster. But there also have been internal debates within Sinn Féin for some time as to whether the 100-year-old policy really serves its interests anymore. Plus, there is a very close relationship between Corbyn and Sinn Féin, which could see Corbyn offer a referendum on Irish independence. And also, the DUP hate Corbyn for his role in being an ally of Sinn Féin stroke IRA kind of people throughout the last 40 years or so. So this is stirring up a whole load of shite, really, that's been had a lid on it for 20 years. And who knows what way that will go. And so much so that yesterday, John Major, former Prime Minister, not my kind of guy, Carlyle Group and Bilderberger, but he is, came out and said he is very concerned about this deal with the DUP because he fears it will trash the Northern Ireland peace process and that's based on having goodwill. And we never know when we're going to need that goodwill. And as far as it goes, I can't disagree with the guy because, for the benefit of basically being something like a majority 2 government, it's goddamn reckless. And in fact, contemplating disrupting the Northern Ireland peace process just to keep a British government together and avoid a second election because he's now terrified of the electorate. I'd say it was pretty close to political terrorism in and of itself. So there goes the talking point against Corbyn, doesn't it? So, whether this raises or fails, whether Corbyn defeats the Queen's speech next week, whether John Major's intervention indicates that there might be a faction inside the Tory party which is prepared to rebel. It wouldn't take many of them. And also, I think that we should read between the lines there and recognise that the old back-channel dialogue upon which the original peace process is built is still very much in use. And we might expect that John Major, Jeremy Corbyn and Sinn Féin are all in coordination with each other, in fact, exactly how they propose to proceed. Because after all, if John Major could deliver a Tory rebellion large enough, there's no need for Sinn Féin to take their seats. And the DUP would effectively be sent back to Northern Ireland with their tail between their legs, and perhaps then that would be a better basis to restart government from Stormont.
Well, I'm looking at an article from the Independent now that's just come out a couple of hours ago saying Jerry Adams tells Theresa May DUP deal puts her in breach of Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah.
Is he just throwing a strop, or has he got a point?
No, I don't think so. I think that if Sinn Féin and the people behind who Sinn Féin fronts for, comes to the point of going, do you know what? We've just been stitched up and betrayed. Well, who wants to take bets? As to what could happen. And is it? This is why I call it an act of political terrorism. Is one dire terrorist threat threatening the nation not enough for Theresa May that she needs another one just to keep her upper hand in? It makes no sense to me. It's rash. It's not good government. It's not in the interest of the country. And don't even make me laugh till I tell me it's strong and stable.
So what would you say is the best direction to take now then for the government? What should Theresa May do now?
I think pieces are in play. I think that if this Queen's speech passes, then the government will limp on, and okay, she might try to keep Brexit on course. I don't really know what the government thinks it would be able to achieve. I mean, she's talking again about internet crackdowns, and I just think the woman's dreaming there. That's never going to go through the Commons.
So you think she should still go ahead with the DUP deal? That's
no. Well, I think that they're going to try to. Whether I think so they should or not, it all depends on the Queen's speech. If they pass the Queen's speech, then the government will limp on until it's defeated on a major issue, which would be a matter of a few months at most. So that way we will end up with a second election this year, or the Queen's speech is voted down. Now, if that happens, what then happens is that Jeremy Corbyn has the right to try to form a minority government, which is very unlikely to succeed, which would then immediately trigger a second election. So if this Queen's speech falls next week, we could be looking at a second election, by the end of the summer. Absolutely. And I think, given that circumstances, I just think there's no credibility even doing any forward thinking, because, as I say, we don't have a government at the moment. We need to see next week whether we actually have a government before we can even assess what that government's chances are. But
I think
no majority, not very much.
She'd have to leave, wouldn't she? Theresa May would have to leave before another election, because I mean, if for her to run another election, that would just be suicide, because her name has been dragged through the mud for all this. I'd say the only chance Tories would have of winning again would be a nice fresh face. Yeah,
you'd have to resign there and then.
Yeah, no, I think
if she uses that Queen's speech, that's it. She's done as Prime Minister.
I think a lot of UKIP voters may felt betrayed because of all this talk about soft Brexit when a lot of them voted for the Tories to boost them for that. So I think in another election, I think we'd be looking at a Labour win, personally.
Well, I agree with you, Paul. I think that is the direction of travel. I think there's a lot of factors behind that. If we talk about the UKIP side of it first, obviously UKIP's vote was slaughtered both at the locals and in the general election. A lot of UKIP people did go to the Tories to vote to support for Theresa May for Brexit, but equally a great deal went over to Labour. And it's important to recognise that probably actually the majority of UKIP voters are former Labour voters, not former Tory voters. So the idea that the Tory party could tell them, or in fact order them, to vote Tory to secure Brexit was always deeply insulting. However, there are a large number of UKIP people did choose to vote Tory to back Brexit, to try and give Theresa May this majority, and obviously that did not work. Equally, I think the hard core of UKIP has remained. The slightly under 2% that continue to vote for the party. I think they are the real heart of UKIP. And I think that that is a seed from which something new could still come. And my view is that this business of voting for other people, I think that lesson has been well and truly learned. So the Tories certainly can't expect those votes from UKIP in the next election, because it's now time to recognise that if you support UKIP, you're going to have to vote UKIP, or you don't support UKIP. So that's the UKIP point of view on that. But turning to what happened within Labour and this fantastic boost of support amongst the young and also women and people who are devastated by cuts and so on. What we saw over the course of that campaign was the benefit of authenticity. And when Corbyn started to go out and just meet people, without none of the media blather that Ed Miliband used to have around him, and connect with people directly, plus the horrendous strategic mistakes in the Tory manifesto, and I think there really were lessons learned from Donald Trump's election in the United States last year. To drive this movement forward with rallies, that sense of excitement, that sense that you can do something, and now that produced this result last week, and now that Labour were within 2% of the same amount of the vote as the Tories got, but the Tories got 20% more seats because of first past the post. But the reality is it was very close. It actually came down to, I think it was something like 2,600 votes spread across the very marginal constituencies, but would have made Corbyn Prime Minister. So Labour was very close last week. And I think that everyone knows that, everyone senses that. Everyone who just voted Labour will definitely vote again for Labour at any election inside the next 6 months. And a whole load more people come out to vote Labour too. So really, yes, the advantages are with Labour now. And it's very unlikely that this anemic Tory party is going to rise back up into minority government in the short term. But equally, things have been so dramatic. We all thought we knew what was going to happen 7 weeks ago, and how wrong we were.
Yeah. Well, I think, I think both parties are pretty poor, to be honest. I mean, I know a lot of people are thinking, Corbyn's going to. I don't think Corbyn's going to do anything to improve the country whatsoever. I think he's been at Labour for 30 years as a career politician.
Just come in and say, Paul, I agree with you about that. I'm not saying that either Labour or Tories are in any way parties that haven't got tremendous baggage and problems and everything else with them. Yeah. It's just that's what people vote for.
That's right, yeah.
So while that conditioning is there,
in some ways,
these things are inevitable. It takes time to turn these things into.
In some ways, I think that it may, and I know this may sound kind of a bit defeatist and pessimistic, but I almost want Labour to get in. Because I think it will. I think they will fail, and then I think we really will see people see that these two parties are both as useless as each other, and because I think people have got this illusion that Corbyn and the Labour are they know they're gonna fix everything, they're gonna make it all right. Money's free, everything's gonna be, everyone's got a golden egg, and it's kind of while Tories are there, they can just take it all out on the Tories are the evil one, the Labours are the good one. And that's not going to be. So I almost want it to happen.
That's the advantage of opposition. Just so it gives. You haven't got to be responsible for anything.
And you've got the smaller parties that rise up and can give it. I mean, it's already happening a little bit in Europe. You're seeing these smaller parties, and obviously, as at the moment, a right wing party comes up, they're Nazis, and that kind of rhetoric, like here in UKIP. But they're growing and getting huge support in their countries, and they're good politicians. They're not. They don't want to kill people and mass killings. They're just good politicians that have very straightforward, no nonsense, anti-liberal views, because they are the views that are making people unhappy at the moment, or making a lot of people unhappy at the moment.
Well, I mean, I find if you look
at
society in a sort of a big picture, you find that it doesn't really matter what country in the world you look at. Left and right wing kind of settle, one at 52, the other at 48. And there's a little bit of to and fro, and that's how democracy moves from being left wing to right wing and back again. But by and large, people sort of divide themselves into roughly equal camps, and that's politics. And a lot of it is all to do with subconscious psychology and mass human psychology and everything else. So I think we're always heading towards at least two parties in politics. I think the one point that I really would want to make about this election we've just had is it's actually now 12 years and 4 elections ago that the first past the post system, which is pretty much unique to Great Britain for parliamentary elections. In fact, nobody else uses the system. It's stupid, basically. But this first past the post system, it last returned what we would call a normal minority government. That is a majority of 25, or over. It was 2005 it lasted that, the third term of Labour. I think it was bigger, it's 50, 60 seats, I'd have to look it up. But in 2010, there wasn't enough for the Tories to govern without going into coalition with the Lib Dems. In 2015, there was a minor win, but wasn't quite a majority government, but enough for the Tories to stay in government from then until now. And then Theresa May wanted to increase that. She wanted to get over 50 so that she knew she could ram things in with the whips and govern like Thatcher used to in the 80s. So at least that was the stated idea. And now look at what we've got. So first past the post, which traditionally favours Tories. And if we didn't have first past the post, if we'd have had proportional representation since the end of World War II. This is a very interesting fact. 14 of the last 15 governments would have been left-wing, and Thatcher would never have happened. So that's how much of an advantage the Tories have had out of the first past the post system. But now they are losing it. And I think that there is a deep irony here, Paul, which is to do with mass immigration. Because the Tories have stuffed southern England and areas which are Tory heartlands. They've stuffed them with migrants. There's more economic migrants in the south of England, by far than anywhere else in the country. I mean, I live in Hampshire, and it's as population dense here as central London, because of the population boost from immigration. But these are not people voting Conservative, because Conservative politics is based on valuing, keeping things the same as they used to be. I don't mean just the Conservative Party, but I mean Conservative politics worldwide. So if you have incomers into a society, they're not invested in that. They're invested in who's going to do the most for me and my family, who's going to give me the most economic advantages. And of course, Comrade Corbyn with his socialist large S is a far more attractive choice. So is it possible that in order to boost GDP by boosting British productivity, by mass importation of a labour force, but then failing to prevent that labour force from being able to vote, the Conservatives have actually cooked their own golden goose when it comes to first past the post?
Well, that would be. I mean, I know UKIP would have loved it if that system wasn't in place in the election before the last.
The proof of the pudding will be the next election. If we have a collapse of the government, oh no, dear me, uncertainty, oh no, how terrible, the media are having a flap for weeks on end, another election campaign, here comes the results day, and we've got another hung parliament, then I think first past the post day will be done. Because all the rational reasons to avoid PR will have been expended. There's a post up on my Facebook timeline. It's a map of Cornwall, and the Tories won every single seat in Cornwall. But the Tories did not have a majority of the votes in Cornwall. So quite simply, the majority of people in Cornwall, about 55%, voted for someone else, but the Tories got all the seats. And you can repeat that across the country.
It's a strange system, but the thing is,
the strong majority government, which both Labour and Tories have followed over the years. Elect us with a strong party, we can make all these changes. I think that's done more damage to the United Kingdom than anything else.
It's a strange system, but on the other hand, you can see the argument that, say, look at the SNP, for example. If during the last election, I think they may have pretty much been on par with the same votes as UKIP. So I'm not sure if that's correct. That might be wrong, but they would have, well, at least in the election before last, they would have had less seats than UKIP would, because UKIP had more votes, but they didn't. So so you're going to get that argument. Yeah, you'll get arguments on both sides when So it's as much as I do agree with everything you're saying, and it is a system that can be very, very, very strange. Maybe there's not a perfect system, there's not a perfect one. But we are getting to that time, so I would like to cover, obviously, putting these at the end of the show, certainly not out of importance, but I guess because it's just a bit depressing to talk about it, but it's there. And with these terrorist attacks in London Bridge and in Manchester, I mean, what is going on with this world, mate?
Okay, well, firstly, with the terror attacks that took place during the general election campaign, so Manchester Arena and London Bridge, that is unheard of in British history, that an election campaign is disturbed in that way. And it certainly affected the election. For one thing, because it completely halted all campaigning twice, so effectively all the election campaigns restarted twice, but also because Labour was immediately on the attack, pointing out the size and scope and scale of the Tory cuts into the size of the police force and other things since 2010. And that hit hard. That definitely hit the Conservative campaign very hard. But moving outside of the political consequences, I think that it was a shocking look through the looking glass kind of moment for the whole country to suddenly realise that there is this massive threat, and it could be any one of many people who could suddenly turn out to be this jihadi suicidist. And that's been was profoundly upsetting and psychologically shocking. And then to have the second attack on top of the first on the day before the concert that was supposed to be for the raising money for the funerals of the victims of the bombing a week before, it was monstrous, absolutely monstrous. But I think the really key thing that came out of it was this figure, 3,500. And that's the number of suspected jihadists the British security is actively tracking, presumably, but probably not actually, 24/7. And there was an interview with Richard Kemp. Is it Colonel? I think it's Colonel, former security forces, and he was making the points about the logistics of this, and that in order to 24/7 surveil one person, it needs 20 people. So if you extrapolate that out, and you're looking at the size of the staff required to actively surveil 24/7, 3,500. Well, I mean, it's such a huge number that it's pretty obvious that's not in fact what is happening.
Well, isn't this though the thing, right? What they're doing, and this is again, I'm going to pick on Corbyn here. We want as much police as possible. It's like, well, perhaps we shouldn't be letting terrorists in the country. I mean, it's
an easy win.
No one's really mentioned anything about nothing about letting these people stroll. I mean, you've got Merkel, who has just let nearly 1 million people just come strolling in from that part of the world. If there was terrorists, if there's ISIS in that, this is a problem that's not going to go away for generations now. It's planted. It's well and truly in Europe now. It's not going away. And it's all very well saying there's not enough police. It's like, okay, so let's live in a police state then. That's the solution, is it? And as you know, yes. Conspiracies out there that perhaps this is the plan all along. If you let terrorists into your country and you put everyone in danger, the only thing is, and what people are going to beg for, is they want a policeman with a gun on every street corner.
Well, look, I look at it like this, Paul. I mean, if I think about some of the horrible stories I heard about London Bridge. And the only way that extra police would have helped would be if there was a policeman, guarding that lady to protect her back when the knife came around and slit her throat. In fact, it's more police. Yes, they are of a benefit, but only if they have a purpose. And when the main problem is intelligence, then more police doesn't necessarily make a difference to the actual ability to combat terrorism. The political will to act, especially on questions like internment, well, that's a different story, isn't it? It's an easy political point to score. Labour can't really lose by complaining about cuts to police because nobody can say they're wrong. But it's far from saying that terrorism is solved by spending X amount more billion to put another 20,000 police on the street every year. That in itself will not solve terrorism. That's a fact. I mean, this is such a nasty problem because what we really have is an idea that has become a virus, and that is this Wahhabi jihadist philosophy, this Islamo-fascist ISIS ideology, which is nothing more than a death cult based on glorifying any parts of the Quran that seem to be about extolling the virtues of killing in order to achieve your aims. So, I mean, it's a nasty cult. It's certainly not indicative of a wider religion per se, but some confused loyalties, perhaps, have certainly not helped the situation. There's been no end of polls about, well, not no end actually, but there have been some significant polls. I wouldn't say there've been no end. It's not as if this area has been getting a thorough look at. But what we have got is pretty significant to sort of say that in the region of 50% of moderate Muslims, people who don't think of themselves as having any connection or loyalty to ISIS, still wouldn't necessarily tell the security forces if they thought somebody was dodgy. But on the other hand, I've also come across a lot of reports that come my way recently of credible accounts of people trying to report extremists, especially some of these Manchester boys, and actually getting nowhere, not getting any response out of the security forces. So there has to be a question mark. Does that mean that these reports are being accumulated, but they don't have the ability to properly deal with them? Or does it mean that there's a deliberate intent to ignore these reports because of some sort of lie hop maintaining a threat situation to then be a proper reaction, solution, justification to more police state powers? Both views may be true at the same time. So that's nasty.
Yeah,
but now that we have this, it's kind of like, your classic mind control. You pick up the phone and there's a and your mind programmed. I mean, it doesn't quite work like that, but it's pretty much the same thing when it comes to jihadi philosophy on a smartphone in a kid's bedroom, slowly warping his mind and making him angrier and more frustrated and more isolated and more extreme and more intolerant, until eventually he sees his life as worthless because the enemy have stopped him being able to live his life properly. So he's going to kill himself to take as many out as he can. Boom. Another ISIS mind bomb explodes.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can say this because I used to think differently, but I think one of the big problems we've got at the moment is people are just very anti-British, the grass is always greener on the other side. And it's not just British. In Europe, we just have this very self-critical view of ourselves, whereas everyone else is brilliant and deserves a break and everything. And I think that kind of is being carried into this terrorism thing, because a lot of these terrorists, I think they hate the country anyway. They're not. People say, "Oh, you've been radicalised." They were probably very anti whatever this country was representing anyway, and didn't really like it. But what it is that Islam, or not obviously Islamic extremism, terrorism, that has given them a platform to justify the hate and to practice something on it. I'm going to kill these people. And it just extreme. It makes it more extreme, and you get this in a lot of people out there now. It's like if we're attacked with a terrorist, it's almost like it didn't happen. It was a hoax, or we deserved it, or this. There's never any loyalty or empathy really for our own, this tribal mindset that you get everywhere else and stuff. And I think that psychology, it's helping us. It's not helping us fight it. It's not helping us to make people fear hurting and attack us. No one fears or worries about attacking us because we're toothless and we don't like ourselves. So people think they can convert us. They can come here. They can push their culture and say, look, you embrace our culture. You have no culture anymore. You don't even like yourself. Look at your government. They don't care about you. We're the good guys. And that's a very dangerous standpoint. And I think one of the reasons why I believe I support a lot of the arguments from movements like the alt-right, not all of them, but a lot of them and stuff, is because at least they're teaching people to start to respect their ancestors, their own roots and who they are, even if we're not perfect and stuff. Just remember who we are and to make a stand in that point. And I actually think from that point of view, you win more respect from people in a way, and you have a better dialogue with people, rather than just being a self-hating, whatever it is.
Well, but I think respect is a great word that you just used there, Paul, because I think that's what it actually is about regaining self-respect.
Yeah, and a mutual
having
respect.
a limited and negative view of oneself and one's culture. I'm all for criticising British culture, and I believe that in free society, it's the individual's duty to hold those who hold power to account. So I think that actually criticism is part of healthy free society. However, that doesn't mean that one should turn away from and hate and throw away one's own culture, because although that's an easy way out, and of course people love easy way outs, the reality is that if there is something wrong with our culture, it's for us to take responsibility for that and do something about it.
Well said, yeah,
and
I agree.
That requires believing in one's own worth. And I think that a lot of these narratives you're describing have been very corrosive to the sense of worth to people living in Western first world society altogether. Now, we know that's not by accident. And the social engineers have been very busy for decades as part of their overall globalist agenda, weakening notions of national identity, national pride, national value. So that has created the situation where we are today. And then with multiculturalism and political correctness coming in waves from the end of the 1980s, accelerating to the peaking all the way through the noughties into now, suddenly we are where we are, and we feel like we can't say things, and we feel like there are huge amounts of British people who've been repressed in terms of the national dialogue, and that's come out in votes for parties like UKIP and a resistance to this globalism, because we do have a culture which is a great deal to be proud of. And we can own our mistakes and still be ourselves going forward into the future. We don't have to become this homogenous Euro global mush. And there's nothing virtuous. To use the word, there's nothing good about the proposed replacement.
No, yeah.
Because especially with the left-wing ideologies, the relativism of morality, and you see that straight away in left-wing responses to the terror attacks. You see, oh yeah, well, what about us in Syria then?
Yeah.
And straight away,
we deserve it.
Well, you know what?
Who
We
cares?
are responsible for this.
Yeah.
Well, I've got news for those people. This ideology is over 140 years old. It's been building and building, and it really kick-started in the 1950s in Iran, which, okay, we had some responsibility for, and then for the mess in Afghanistan and so forth. But Indonesia has got a huge problem with fundamentalist Islamic terrorism now, and they've got nothing to do with the Middle East whatsoever. So this sense that it's only because of British foreign policy that we're being attacked by Islamofascist terrorists is a nonsense. Islamofascist terrorists attack anywhere and everywhere, but Islam is not the dominant culture, and they think they've got a chance of twisting things to make it.
The thing is,
that's what it's really all about. Yeah, and what they would love to do is provoke a race war.
Absolutely.
And spark things off that way.
The thing is, everything about multiculturalism is not democratic, because what happens is for example, the most growing movements we have in Europe at the moment is groups that want Sharia law. We have far-right groups that want fascist rule, like straight back to the nationalism, that just sort of stick to that. And then we've got communists that want a socialist communist rule and stuff. And all this is growing because when you've got multiculturalism, democracy only works when you've got a harmonious society that's not much different. So every time you vote, you sway a little bit to the left. Oh, okay, never mind. You sway a little bit to the right. And you're just all balancing, you're sort of like a bird gliding along peacefully, and everyone's generally happy, even though they may prefer this guy or that guy, and vice versa. That's how democracy works. When you get in a multicultural society, things ain't up for debate. There's certain things that you don't vote for. They say we're not going to let you take it away from us. This is our culture. This is who we are. And the other guys go, well, this is our culture. You don't vote that. That's who you are. That's what you are. So it's literally just a case of which one starts to dominate, and that's why you're getting so many people now that, oh, you're a fascist. Yeah. But notice whenever you have the argument for the Western side, you're a fascist. Whereas any argument for the Muslim side or the Islamic culture side, they're defended. Not all Muslims are Sharia law. Not all Muslims are that way. Whereas when you're in the West and you like Nigel Farage, you're a Nazi. And this is what worries me. This is why people are growing in this country and are becoming more nationalistic, because it's defence. It's a worry. It's like
this, though, isn't it? If I really believed that Nigel Farage was Hitler, if I really believed that Donald Trump was Hitler, if I really believed that they wanted to introduce race genocide policies, if I really believed that, then I would resist them with everything that I've got. And I think a large part of even the people at the centre of movements like Antifa, there is a lot of misguided good intentions there. But it's because their views are polarised and their perspectives are programmed, and they don't have a holistic picture, but they have a polarised picture. but they become, well, frankly, useful idiots for people like George Soros, who they don't know it, but he's paying for the bus. And that's the problem with polarized political agitation, and that's partly what the democratic process is supposed to avoid. It is because it's supposed to enable people to resolve their problems without having to resort to heavy boys on the streets who start busting up meetings and beating up people and even burning books, for heaven's sake. I mean, this is the progressive left in America I'm talking about. You understand? Who's actually done all those things in the past year. And I think that if we look across to what's happening with America and the left here in the UK, it could certainly go the same way. But I want to bring this back to this particular problem with these 3,500 jihadists in the UK, Paul, if I may, because I know we're coming close on time. Because we had some arrests in the aftermath of all three, we should say, terrorist attacks we've had in the space of the last 2 months. So we had some arrests with Westminster Bridge. We had some arrests with Manchester Arena. We had some arrests with London Bridge. Almost all of those people have been let out. We've got dead attackers who certainly aren't talking and telling any more tales. And we've really don't seem to have got very far in penetrating any kind of network that they may or may not have been part of. And meanwhile, that's crossed a handful off of 3,500. So now it's like 3,492 or something. So we're not really tackling the problem. And now we've got the elections happen, and we've got this whole new flaff. Now we've got a building on fire, how terrible that is, and how awful the Tory cuts are going to be, and it'll be the Tories' fault for outsourcing it. So the national narrative is rolling on. But this threat from these jihadists has just stealthed to camouflage back into the background. It's proverbial a terrorist elephant in the room. And that is not going to be the end of this story, Paul. And what's going to happen now is, because of the movement of the national narrative, the people who were saying, "Oi, we need some actual military action here," because we cannot. This situation is impractical and implausible that we can continue to watch thousands of people ready for the next time one of them is going to pull off one of these attacks. And we need to take those people out of society so we can find out what's going on with them. And there's been a very good spokesman for that, which is former SAS guy Phil Campion, and I do recommend his videos. They're very well worth checking out. He's a sort of British military common sense of a heart, and very good. And I happen to know some kind of Hereford type people, and I know that's generally the way they think. And I think that is ultimately what we're going to come to, because when the next attacks come, and it's going to happen, it's going to get harder and harder for the government to avoid needing to take actual direct action. And also, I think with personalities like Sadiq Khan, he was on the sofa with Piers Morgan getting a proper grilling, where he had to admit that of the 200 jihadists who've come back into London since he's been London mayor, he does not know where they are. And so this is a horrendous scandal, among all other scandals. But right now we have media fudge because, again, they'd rather not talk about it because they don't want us getting upset.
Yeah.
So there's going to be trouble ahead on this.
Okay, well, that's where we're going to have to leave it. It's been brilliant speaking to you again, John, and of course you are going to be coming on the show a lot more when we get things swinging. And again, I apologise for the absence this month. David's been away, I've been busy, and so on. But I think our listeners are used to it now. These little lull patches happen, and then we come back with a vengeance. And we will be coming back with you, doing some stuff with us. Anything you'd like to throw out there just for a last thing for our listeners? It's been
really good to talk, Paul. I think we've managed to thrash out some territory there. I hope it's been interesting to people. Of course, come and find me at my Facebook page. And as always, look forward to talking again. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. And that was John White. Some of you may know already that John and I do go back quite a long way with regards to the internet. We met a few times as well. Just as a conspiracy movement was rolling, we were there debating. And I'd like to think we've both stuck to our guns in terms of seeking truth and standing and speaking out for truth best we can, at least. No one's perfect. But I think we both do that. And I think while the conspiracy movement is, let's just say, a little bit more dark, I think we're more in the midst of it. It's on our doorstep. So it's a bit more scary. But I think, that's life, isn't it? I think at the moment you look around what's going on, and there's a lot of horror out there in the world, and it's up to us to maintain the balance, I think. And that I posted something on my Facebook page not long ago saying that I believed, I believe in hate, not hope, because there's this movement in Britain called Hope Not Hate, and it's this repetitive hope not hate, hope. And I thought about hope. I thought, no, we hope too much. Sometimes you need to hate to realize something that you don't like, that you want to change. Because if you don't recognize it, if you don't recognize that you don't like it, you're not happy, then you don't change anything. You don't have any hope. So sometimes you've got to hate. And I posted this, a few people thought it was controversial, but that's the point I'm making. And I think one thing about the conspiracy movement, or should I say the truth movement, is it's too one-sided on the hope, peace, love, and all that. That's a natural target for every human being, unless you're a psychopath. Most human beings want that, but sometimes you need to accept that there's a darker side, a strength you have to take and say, no, I'm not happy with this, and speak your mind. Don't be afraid of what people think and say to you. If you're being honest, then you'll meet new friends anyway, and I think we're at that stage now where people got to start speaking out, sticking together, and not afraid to throw a little bit of hate out there, because keeping it in it's not going to bring us hope. Hope without that is submission. It's get on your knees and hope, and if you're lucky, we'll give you something. But in a way, that was John that did that to me, kind of brought me back to old days, got me philosophizing there. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed this one. Sorry it has been a long time. Lots of things have just held me up, and I looked at the last show and I was like, gosh, it's been a long time. And I'm sure Shana with Hijack Radio will be adding soon, and we're going to get the ball rolling. So yeah, good guests in the horizon. Thanks again. Keep telling your friends about the show. Keep linking the show. More importantly, keep linking the show. And we will be speaking with you very soon. Till the next time. Bye.